Much, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Mr Hood, in particular because you're one of the few members of the House who can properly pronounce my constituency name of East Kilbride, Straven and Lesmahago. Just as a step for a hint to any members who wish to refer to the full title during the debate. I'm very pleased to be having this important debate today. But can I say first of all that the motivation for me to secure the debate was the 1st December 2014 Westminster Hall debate, which was procured by my honourable friend, member for Easington, under the subject heading of ending the conflict in Palestine. I reread that Hansard record recently, and what struck me was how much common ground there was between honourable and right honourable members who contributed to the debate that day. I spoke in the debate also and championed my belief that the two-state solution was the only way forward. But it also struck me that that debate could act as a foundation to build upon, and I wanted to try and build upon that foundation today. I recognise there are still significant problems. From my perspective, Mr Hood, the problem that we have in the UK Parliament is that we have far too many members who can't separate the troubled history of this part of the world from the objective of a two-state solution. And as a result, far too often debates in this place become mired in the grisly, macabre and desperate pit of relying on the body count of the most recent conflict, or a selective part of history to condemn one side over the other. And what both sides often fail to do is recognise properly their own weaknesses, whether it's the contribution of a fractured and weak Palestinian leadership, or the lurch to the right in Israeli politics. Or in this place in particular, when violence does break out, the rush to condemn Israel matched by a pedestrian-paced admonishment of the Hamas violence that has started that same trouble. And while the 1st of December debate marked, for the most part, a coming together of minds on many issues, every proposal that was made as a consequence of that debate was negative. From my perspective, Mr Hood, it was an oxymoron of a debate, a positive start conjoined to a negative finish, because the conclusion was boycotts and sanctions. Boycotts and sanctions won't solve the problems of Palestine and Israel. They'll pour diesel on an already blazing fire, create more resentment and create more obstacles to peace. My debate today is designed to create an environment for peace, to recognise the plight of the people of Gaza and identify how we can overcome the barriers that will create a more successful outcome for everyone. But it will also set out the very real threat that Gaza faces from within and the internal struggles that beset the Palestinian leadership. First of all, Mr Hood, can I say, in the interest of transparency, that I place on record that I am one of the vice-chairs of Labour Friends of Israel. I am also an unequivocal supporter of a two-state solution for two peoples with Israel safe, secure and recognised within its borders, living alongside a democratic, independent Palestinian state. And colleagues, can I be clear from the outset that last summer's war was a disaster and a tragedy for the people of Gaza and for the people of Israel. And 6 months on from the end of Operation Protective Edge, this debate presents a timely opportunity to discuss ways in which Britain can contribute to halting and stopping the recurring spiral of violence in Gaza. At home and in this House, the war caused both anger and division. But surely we should now be able to unite around one goal, one single objective, to ensure that the death and the destruction and the suffering experienced by both peoples are not repeated. Let me be absolutely clear. The people of Gaza didn't cause or start the war, nor did the people of Israel. The responsibility for it and the destruction which followed rests squarely with Hamas. And it has done so on each of the 3 occasions in the past 6 years when Hamas has launched indiscriminate rocket attacks against Israeli civilians from residential areas of Gaza. The question today is, what can be done to break this vicious cycle of violence? To a backdrop of Hamas's ongoing efforts not to support the people of Gaza, but to continue their war against Israel. And while the international donors have pledged the enormous sum of $5.4 billion for investment in Gaza, not one thin dime, Mr Hood, has been spent because Fatah and Hamas can't agree on payments to Hamas's civil servants, and they can't decide who will control the Rafah crossing. Those are the priorities in those discussions. So instead of taking the opportunities to invest resources in their people, Hamas are investing their resources in rearming. And now, ominously, they have almost regained their full military capability. Let me place on record here, Mr Hood, that Hamas are preparing for further attacks on Israel as this debate takes place. And that leads me to my first positive contribution on the way forward to peace. The international community needs to put an end to the threat posed by Hamas and other terrorist groups by halting rearmament and urgently pursuing disarmament in the Gaza Strip. Second, the lives of the Palestinians living in Gaza must be improved, not simply through reconstruction, but also through concrete steps to lift the restrictions on the movement of people and goods imposed not only by Israel, but by Egypt, which stifle Gaza's economic development and future prosperity. And let me be unequivocal. The second objective has to be utterly dependent on the first, because the reality of Hamas in perpetuating the conflict and laying the groundwork for another bloody war must be confronted by everyone. In December, Mr Hood, Hamas celebrated its 27th anniversary by burning effigies of Jews, parading trucks carrying long-range rockets through the streets of Gaza. At the celebrations, Hamas's
military spokesperson supplying the group with arms and support. A month earlier, Iranian leaders had confirmed their good relations with the Islamist group, and having already done so much to hamper the cause of peace between Israel and its neighbours, Iran pledged to redouble its malevolent efforts with these words: "The West Bank will be armed like Gaza," tweeted the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. Hamas claims to be concerned about the welfare of the Palestinian people. Many of us have long known that that is a lie, and they are proving it once again. As I mentioned earlier, instead of turning its efforts to rebuilding Gaza, Hamas has rebuilt its depleted arsenal of rockets and mortars. In addition, it is rebuilding its terror tunnels, and it's rebuilding its armed forces by recruiting a new so-called popular army of young men aged between 15 and 21. Last month, 17,000, Mr Hood, teenagers spent their mid-term break at Hamas's military camps being drilled in how to launch attacks through tunnels and how to kidnap and murder Israeli soldiers. That's Hamas's education policy, teaching young people to kill. Hamas, Mr Hood, also like to tax and spend, which is a policy that sometimes can be a subject of debate in the UK. But their tax and spend is slightly different. It taxes the people of Gaza so it can spend its money reconstructing its terrorist infrastructure. For example, on a list that I've recently seen, furniture imported to Gaza at a cost of 1,200 shekels faces an additional tax of 800 shekels. And that's so true of so many other goods that have to be imported into Gaza. Hamas says that Israel and Egypt should lift their blockade, but only 2 weeks ago, Mr Hood, we learned that the Israeli Navy had intercepted a ship travelling from the Sinai to Gaza. On board, liquid fiberglass, one of the many dual-use materials it uses to build its weapons of war. In this case, Mr Hood, booby traps for houses with tunnels running underneath them. The reality of Hamas is clear. It cares not at all for the people of Gaza, and the intentions of Hamas are also clear. It seeks to wage another bloody war against the people of Israel. In the face of that reality and those intentions, there is only one solution, and that is demilitarisation. The international community knows it, and during last summer's conflict, both the EU and the United States of America made it clear that demilitarisation of the Gaza Strip rested at the heart of ending the violence. Moreover, and this is a really, really important point, Mr Hood,
The Palestinian Authority supports it. Preventing a new war requires an urgent drive towards demilitarisation of Gaza. But Gaza needs more than just demilitarisation. It needs hope and it needs opportunity for its people. And there's a real disappointment that despite last spring's Palestinian reconciliation deal, the Palestinian Unity Government has failed to establish control in Gaza, where Hamas operates what President Abbas calls a shadow government. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Hood. Thank you for giving way. Just taking back to his comments on demilitarisation, does he agree with me that the risk, given the Egyptian crackdown in the Sinai and the evidence we've seen recently of increased smuggling of weapons into Gaza through the Med, does he believe that the building of a seaport, which we'd all like to see built in Gaza eventually, but not under the current circumstances, whether that would increase the likelihood of Gaza being demilitarised or increase the likelihood of weapons being smuggled into Gaza?
Well, I'm going to come on to to talk about a seaport and an airport, but as you'll see from my comments, the proposal that I'm putting forward today in terms of setting out a route map for peace is that it has to be premised by the demilitarisation, because no one is going to invest that type of money into Gaza when there's still holes within Gaza, the ability for the whole thing to fall apart and be destroyed again because of the malevolent influence of Hamas. Yes.
I'm grateful. Given his opening comments, I'm looking forward to what he's going to say about Israel's responsibility and contribution, because at the moment his speech could be written by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Tel Aviv. But is he seriously suggesting that aid should be restricted, the reconstruction of Gaza should be refused without the condition of demilitarisation? Does he realise that most of the senior NGOs in response to this debate have said that that is not an appropriate way to behave?
McCann.
Well, as a member of the International Development Committee who visited the occupied Palestinian territories and saw first-hand the tragic circumstances that the Palestinians face, my hope and aspiration would be that the Palestinian leadership would want to take all steps necessary to ensure that they can improve the plight of their people. And surely, goodness, the plight of their people will be immeasurably improved if the people who are causing the problems and the violence can stop doing that. And therefore, demilitarisation should be a prerequisite to that taking place, because, as my honourable friend knows, that until that is done, then you're not going to have a willing partner in the State of Israel participating in those talks. And it always strikes me, and perhaps they missed the first start of the contribution, the start of the contribution that I made, that we continually look backwards on this problem instead of looking forward. And I hope, in my coming words, Mr Hood, to look in that frontward direction and hopefully make a positive contribution to a proposal for peace. So, as I mentioned, President Abbas calls Hamas a shadow government, and the renewed tensions between Hamas and Fatah since last autumn are ominous. When Hamas's reconciliation agreement with Fatah was under pressure in June last year, it responded by kidnapping and murdering 3 Israeli teenagers, which was a precursor which provoked the war. Reconstruction and the political and security environment are inseparable issues, and I quite frankly can't fathom anyone who suggests that they are not. And I have received correspondence from charities and NGOs that work in the area, and I have to say, Mr Chairman, and based on my visit to the area and having witnessed these events firsthand, that I think that they are in turn deluded that investment can be put in without dealing with the military and security issues. The people of Gaza have been the casualties of these failures. The lives of the Palestinians living in Gaza must be improved through reconstruction and also
by my colleague, my honourable member raised a few moments ago. The blockade of Gaza by Israel and Egypt restricts not only the movement of people and goods in and out of the territory, but with it any prospect of much-needed economic development, prosperity and the alleviation of poverty. If poverty is the breeding ground of terror, economic prosperity can be a catalyst, can it not, for peace? And while the Palestinian Authority and Hamas argue over salaries and who controls what, it's actually the Israelis that have kept Gaza supplied. So while Hamas has concentrated in guns and bombs, and with access to Egypt completely closed, Israel has allowed 43,000 residents from Gaza to purchase building materials for personal use. It's allowed students to cross the border to study in Israel, and people have been able, contrary to
contributions made in the 1st of December debate to travel to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and visit their families in Israel. Of course, I completely recognise, Mr Hood, that there is a massive journey still to be undertaken. However, in order for Israel and Egypt to open up Gaza crossings further and to allow the maximum amount of material in, they have to be given credible guarantees about their own security, with assurances that Gaza will no longer be used as a base for terrorist activity. And I'll be happy, Mr Hood, to take any interventions from people who are willing to condemn that, make that point as well. And I will give way to my honourable friend from Easington.
I'm grateful, because I didn't really want to intervene, but there are a number of issues there that I've got to challenge. I want to do it very quickly. I listened to a Palestinian last night in the room adjacent who was denied access to the Gaza Strip to visit his dying father, whose father was denied the opportunity to be transferred from Gaza to a specialist hospital, perhaps died because of that. But is my honourable friend seriously suggesting that this blockade, which predates Hamas's control of Gaza, is he supporting that as a collective punishment? Surely all of the UN agencies and charities would...
McCann.
Thank you, Mr Hood. The answer, and unlike some people who contribute to these debates, I'll give a direct answer. I believe the blockade of Gaza is unsustainable. I think it cannot be continued. But if I was part of the Palestinian leadership, the argument I would be taking forward inside those debates is that we must ensure that there is demilitarisation, that we have security for our own people, as well as the other people who live beside us in the borders, to ensure that we can get the reconstruction, development and the amount of traffic going in and out of Gaza, which allows people to get the treatment that they are. Now, I'm going to take an intervention at the moment because I'm still finishing with this one. In terms of the tragic circumstances that my honourable member of Easington relays about the individual that was prevented getting medical treatment, I also heard those tragic stories when we were in the occupied Palestinian territories and we were speaking to people. But again, I just find it difficult to understand that honourable members would seek to refute my contention that the way forward is demilitarisation and taking the weapons out of Gaza as a way to making progress in all of these issues.
I think giving way, he's making a very powerful case for what needs to happen going forward. Would he agree with me that Gaza, and that almost certainly, unless Hamas gives up its power in Gaza, then we're going to be here in the same problems in the years to come?
Sadly, I must share the honourable member's concern about what the future holds if we don't see these major impasses being removed. And that perhaps leads me neatly to what the international community needs from Hamas. What has been Hamas's reaction? Hamas can I make some progress and then I'll be happy to give way again. Hamas continues to reject the Quartet principles. It has publicly condemned any peace negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian Authority and continues to reject the two-state solution. By contrast, the Palestinian Unity Government has committed itself to the Quartet principles and is a legitimate interlocutor in Gaza, both for the international community and for Israel. So all sides must do their best to enable this government to actually govern in Gaza. I'm happy to give way to the honourable gentleman.
On the issue of demilitarisation, could I just ask the honourable member that if Gaza was demilitarised, could he guarantee that the Palestinians would be treated as well in Gaza as they are in the demilitarised West Bank and East Jerusalem?
Yeah, exactly.
What I would, I think we could hope for even better than that. I would hope, Mr Hood, that what we could hope for in terms of a normalisation process is that the rights of Palestinians to be completely restored and for them to live in freedom and peace alongside their neighbours, the State of Israel, which is words that I very rarely hear said by people who propagate the type of view that he holds. And Well, from somebody, someone says nonsense from a sedentary position, but the position is that I am sick and tired of coming to debates in this House and we hear about people dying and we hear about the blood and we hear about the disaster of buildings being destroyed and hospitals being destroyed. I'm sick and tired coming to debates like this. I'm trying to move forward with a positive proposal for peace. So, in terms of Labour, it was a Labour government that was responsible for prescribing Hamas, Mr Hood, its military wing when we were in government, and I commend the government for its work to ensure it remains listed in the European Union. However, I would also urge the Minister, and perhaps he can address this when he makes his contribution, to assess the increasing evidence that Hamas's political and military wings are contrapuntally linked, and they should also be looked at in terms of their contribution to peace or war. Moving forward, Britain can contribute to preventing another war in Gaza, and I've set out the practical steps. First, demilitarisation and initiatives to stop Hamas's rearmament, with additional reassurance that the British Government must also pledge that the push to secure a nuclear deal with Iran does not lessen the pressure on it to cease its destabilising policies in the region. Second, Britain can show leadership at the United Nations Security Council by proposing an initiative that would impose sanctions on UN members caught attempting to transfer weapons to Hamas and other militant groups. Such a resolution would provide a clear signal that the international community is committed to preventing a return to hostilities in Gaza. But it should also go further, Mr Hood, by providing for disarmament inspectors on the ground who would oversee the destruction of rockets, mortars and other heavy weaponry in Gaza. And third, and crucially important, a robust staged disarmament mechanism in return for economic development must be designed to open up Gaza and reconnect it with the world. So together, Israel, the Palestinian Unity Government, the Quartet, Egypt, Jordan and the Arab League should present Hamas with a clear choice. Let the disarmament inspectors into Gaza. Let them do their job, and in return, the international community, Israel and the Palestinian Unity Government will immediately begin the work needed to ensure Gaza's reconstruction and future prosperity. And I would also remind you at this point, Mr Hood, at the moment, that $5.4 billion investment hasn't been prevented by Israel or the international partners. It's been prevented because the two competing elements of the Palestinian leadership can't agree on a way forward. And, most importantly, Mr Hood, with our place in the European Union and our seat on the Security Council, Britain can lead an international effort to stop what will be the inevitable next step without demilitarisation, and the inevitable next step in this House. Another debate, perhaps from the Honourable Member for Easington and another member, which will be talking about another bloody war in Gaza. There should be nothing, Mr Hood, although I suspect people may not agree with this point, there should be nothing in my contribution today that divides any of us. If some of you want to go over the history of who's right and who's wrong, quite frankly, count me out. If some people believe that what Hamas is doing can be justified, please have the honesty to stand up and say so in your contributions. However, unlike the solutions, I'm coming to a peroration and I want to make sure that people have the opportunity to make a contribution as well. However, unlike the solutions offered on the 1st of December 2014, when my honourable friend from Easington led the debate, my solutions are positive and realisable. They combine the need for the people of Israel to be secure with the needs of the Palestinians to have the rights that they are entitled to, Mr Hood. And I finish with this challenge for those that will follow in this debate. If your motivation on this issue is driven by a desire to seek a resolution, I welcome it. But what you must also consider is whether your motivation is a desire to be a proxy for the status quo.
Can I just inform